One of the most iconic characters in The Simpsons is Montgomery Burns. Sure, there aren't tons of great things Mr. Burns has done, but there's a few things he's done to better himself as a person, even though it's mostly all evil stuff. Hey, every show has to have a villain, right? The Simpsons just happens to have a textbook maniac as the show antagonist. Before we get into the best and worst Mr. Burns moments from The Simpsons, subscribe to CBR and ring that bell to join our notification squad so you never miss any of our Simpsons videos. Without further ado, let's get into it. Who shot Mr. Burns? To put it lightly, Mr. Burns isn't the nicest guy. Not only is he very awful to his low-wage workers, he never donates any of his millions of dollars to charity, he treats his undying loyal aide Mr. Smithers like a servant, and there's many more awful, horrible things he's done to Springfield, its residents, and literally the whole world. Like that one time he tried to block out the entire sun. Yeah, the sun. Not only does he attempt to block out the sun for all of Springfield like some kind of comic book supervillain, he does tons of other pretty awful stuff in one of the most famous episodes of The Simpsons ever, the two-part Season 7 special, Who Shot Mr. Burns? Not only does Mr. Burns not remember Homer's name, driving him a touch insane, but Mr. Burns decides he wants to drill the oil under the town's elementary school. Even after Principal Skinner declines Mr. Burns' request to drill the oil, the rich villain does it anyway and establishes a slant drill operation to get to the oil before the school does, literally stealing money from the children. His drilling causes unrest among many Springfield citizens, which pushes them to come up in arms against Mr. Burns for destroying their town. This falls on deaf ears, unsurprisingly. Mr. Burns does his next horrible thing by creating a large, complicated mechanism that covers up the sun at all times of the day, forcing the residents of Springfield to pay to use electricity from his power plant. At the end of the episode, Burns is shot by an unknown person, which shook up the audience hard and had everyone guessing who shot Mr. Burns. Of course, the whole next part of the episode is finding out who shot Mr. Burns, which, spoiler alert, was Maggie. Publicity stunt for the show or not, we still don't know if Burns deserved to get shot and nearly killed, but hey, it made one heck of an episode. Mr. Burns and Marge. This one is pretty rough. Marge gets a job at the power plant to make some money after the Simpsons family learns that their house's foundation is significantly damaged. This episode crosses a line because it deals with harassment in the workplace. Burns becomes enamored with Marge and flirts with her up and down and tries to turn the charm on around her. But of course, she's not interested. First, Burns is kind and subtle about it, but later goes into full creep mode, leading to him firing her because she refuses to be romantically involved with him. She replies saying that she'll sue the pants off him, and he responds in an awful, crude way. He runs Bart over. Another classic evil Burns moment was when he hit Bart with his car. This was during Season 2, all the way back in 1991. Despite the accident scaring a few locals, Bart gets away relatively unscathed with no life-threatening injuries besides the mental scars of being run over by a car. This sets up the episode's plot of Marge grappling with bending the truth a little bit to get more money out of Burns. But of course, she does the right thing because she's one of the most honest and good people on the entire show. To put more emphasis on how wicked Burns is, when Smithers gets out of the car to examine Bart, Mr. Burns quips, "Oh, for crying out loud, give him a nickel and let's get going." How's that impression, huh? Nailed it? Yeah, I did. Anyway, sure, a nickel's definitely going to cover hospital costs. Last time we checked, there's no free healthcare in Springfield. We need PETA. Another awful moment in the seemingly never-ending list of bad things Mr. Burns has done was when he tried to make clothes out of puppies a la Cruella de Vil. Mr. Burns is pure evil in the episode, but granted, when is he not? The thing is, this episode gave us one of the catchiest songs from The Simpsons ever. Mr. Burns sang, "See my vest," a song about his large wardrobe of animal furs to the tune of Be My Guest from Beauty and the Beast. While it's PETA's worst nightmare, it makes for one one catchy song. After The Simpsons' faithful dog, Santa's little helper, fathers puppies just like in 101 Dalmatians, or rather 101 little greyhound babies, Mr. Burns wants to adopt them all, but reveals his true intention with them behind closed doors. Thankfully, Mr. Burns never goes through with making clothes out of their puppy fur. He instead raises them to be racing greyhounds and makes a good chunk of change from the little pups, which leaves Homer less than pleased, but for Mr. Burns, it's excellent. The flying hellfish. The list of bad things Mr. Burns has ever done keeps getting longer. He has tried to get numerous characters on the show killed off, including Abe Simpson, Homer's long-winded and old-timey dad. The plot unravels in a flashback showing that Abe and Burns fought in World War II together. Not only was he the worst soldier, he also didn't care at all about his squad members, which eventually leads him attempting to kill his last living platoon member, Abe. Burns even wrecked Abe's opportunity to shoot Hitler. Way to screw up history, Burns. Both Burns and Abe were in a platoon called the Flying Hellfish, where, one day in battle, they found valuable artwork, but they couldn't claim it as their own. They struck up a secret, illegal pact within their squadron that whoever is the last living member of the group will inherit the priceless artwork. In the episode, Abe and Monty Burns are the last two Flying Hellfish members, and, of course, rather than waiting out for the death of Abe, Burns plans to kill him so he can get the artwork. Burns hires an assassin to kill Abe, but the gunman fails numerous times. Burns goes as far as ruining part of the Simpsons' house and attempted to extort Abe's key to the art safe. Now Bart is in on this too and is helping Grandpa Abe get the chest located at the bottom of the sea. With his notorious lack of concern for human life, Monty now tries to kill both Grandpa and Bart, who you know is still just a child and got swept up in this screwy adventure. In case you're wondering, no one gets the artwork and it's returned to Germany. Break a leg. The flashback takes place when Burns and the town's sleazy mayor walk on the boardwalk, discussing plans to build a new casino. Burns reminisces about his time as a boy playing on the boardwalk on bumper cars. It looks like it's almost 100 years prior due to the Victorian-era clothes that he's wearing, since there's a running joke with Mr. Burns being ageless. Child Burns in his bumper cart runs over the legs of an Irish worker. When the worker realizes it's Monty Burns, he permits the boy to continue to ram into his legs, because Burns is of such affluence. It's horribly graphic. Mr. Burns goes on to laugh about this memory for days, to the point he forgets what he was laughing about, then reminds himself that it was because he crushed a poor man's legs and starts laughing all over again. There really is no end to how evil this guy can get. Lil Lisa Fish Planet. Okay, so Mr. Burns is a pretty terrible guy overall, but there are a few instances of Burns trying to be a decent guy, like in the episode The Old Man and the Lisa. Burns gets struck with the realization that he doesn't have as much money as he thought he did. He goes bankrupt and has to move in with Mr. Smithers. Mr. Burns is reduced to living an average lifestyle and wants to help contribute to the Smithers household, even if Mr. Smithers doesn't think he's capable. Burns takes a bus ride for the first time and introduces himself to other average people with, "I'm Monty Burns." It's almost endearing if you forget the awful, horrible past he has. At the store, he even struggles with basic grocery shopping and can't decide between ketchup and catsup, which makes the grocers think he's insane and lands him in the Springfield retirement home along with Abe Simpson. Having spent his whole life helping to destroy the environment, Burns repents by learning how to recycle with the help of Lisa. Now living his best life, Burns makes a new plant named after Lisa that's environmentally friendly, or so it seems from the outside. During a tour of the plant, Lisa is horrified to learn that he uses tons of sea life to make Lil Lisa's patent-pending animal slurry, a multi-purpose edible compound. Lisa learns that even when Burns is trying to be good, he's evil. It's just a part of his nature. Still trying to be a good guy, Burns sells the company to a fish stick marketer and makes back his millions. He offers to give Lisa 10% of the profits, which would have come to around $12 million. Lisa, being the good person she is, denies the money, which sends Homer into a literal heart attack. At the end of the day, at least he tried to be good. Bart donates blood. Another instance of Mr. Burns kinda being nice was after Bart agreed to be his blood donor. Again, this is the same evil guy who has screwed over the town, its businesses, and its residents several times, almost killed Bart's grandpa, and even Bart himself. Homer convinces Bart, who has the rare blood type Burns needs for the transfusion, to give Burns his blood in hopes that Mr. Burns would give them a cash reward. Mr. Burns only writes the Simpsons family a meager thank you card for saving his life. Homer, enraged thinking they should have been compensated better, writes a hate-filled note that accidentally gets mailed to Burns. Burns vows to make Homer's life awful, but Smithers convinces him that Bart and the Simpsons did save his life. As a thank you, Mr. Burns sends Bart a strange gift of the Olmec head, which Mr. Burns explains is the god of war. They accept the gift, but it's literally useless to them, so it's kept in the basement. It sometimes makes little appearances throughout the series, like at a yard sale, and meets its demise when the house is swallowed up by a sinkhole. Mr. Burns makes a cake. Another fun one is when Mr. Burns makes a cake for Homer. It's a nice gesture when anyone makes you a cake, but it's extra special when it's made by someone as awful as Mr. Burns. We've established that Mr. Burns doesn't know how to do basic human things like groceries, so for him to actually be able to bake a cake from scratch is a big deal. Not only does it look awful, but it sure as heck tastes awful, as confirmed by Mr. Smithers, whose facial expression says it all. It has whole figs in it. Figs! That Burns apparently picked himself, so he deserves some gold stars because he DIY'd that part of the recipe. Overall, Mr. Burns is a pretty horrible person, and probably won't ever change. What's the worst thing you think Mr. Burns has done? Should we do more Simpsons videos? Let us know in the comments section below, and don't forget to subscribe to CBR for even more Simpsons content. Thanks for watching.